Since Putin began his military buildup on Ukrainian borders, just since then, the price of the gas at the pump in America went up 75 cents. And with this action, it's going to go up further. I'm going to do everything I can to minimize Putin's price hike here at home.
President Joe Biden announcing a ban on Russian energy imports to the United States, filling a gap in sanctions imposed on Russia and President Vladimir Putin for launching the war against Ukraine. But President Biden also acknowledging that already record-level gasoline prices in the U.S. are likely to go higher. Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, March 8, 2022. Republicans in Congress, meanwhile, criticizing President Biden's energy policies, calling for more domestic production to reduce gas prices. President Biden rejecting that idea. The CIA Director William Burns telling the U.S. House Intelligence Committee that President Putin is angry and frustrated at how the war is going and will likely double down and try to grind down the Ukrainian military with no regard for civilian casualties. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky speaking virtually to members of the British Parliament, vowing to fight to ultimate victory and using language reminiscent of the late British Prime Minister Winston Churchill when Churchill rallied his nation to defeat the Nazis during World War II. Also today, down to the wire for the $1.5 trillion omnibus spending bill that Congress needs to pass before the end of the week, and President Biden signing into law to avert a U.S. government shutdown. The bill will also be including, we understand, emergency aid for Ukraine, now up to $14 billion, and billions more to prepare for another possible COVID case surge. And leaders of the cross-country anti-vaccine mandate protest, known as the People's Convoy, meeting with Republican senators in Washington, D.C. This from Market Watch. President Joe Biden on Tuesday announced a U.S. ban on government oil imports as he seeks to ratchet up pressure on Moscow in retaliation for its invasion of Ukraine. The president also warned that U.S. consumers would feel the effect in the form of a further increase in gasoline prices. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had pleaded with U.S. and Western officials to cut off the imports. Oil had been a glaring omission. The massive sanctions put in place on Russia over the invasion. That from Market Watch. President Biden speaking about this, making the announcement at the White House.
Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy. We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. This is a move that has strong bipartisan support in the Congress and, I believe, in the country. Americans have rallied to support their Ukrainian people and made it clear we will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war. We made this decision in close consultation with our allies and our partners around the world, particularly in Europe, because a united response to Putin's aggression has been my overriding focus, to keep all NATO and all of the EU and our allies totally united. We're moving forward with this ban, understanding that many of our European allies and partners may not be in a position to join us. The United States produces far more oil domestically than all the European countries combined. In fact, we're a net exporter of energy. So we can take this step when others cannot. But we're working closely with Europe and our partners to develop a long-term strategy to reduce their dependence on Russian energy as well. Our teams are actively discussing how to make this happen, and today we remain united. We remain united in our purpose to keep pressure mounting on Putin and his war machine. This is a step that we're taking to inflict further pain on Putin. But there will be cost as well here in the United States. I said I would level with the American people from the beginning. And when I first spoke to this, I said defending freedom is going to cost. It's going to cost us as well in the United States. Republicans and Democrats understand that. Republicans and Democrats alike have been clear that we must do this.
President Biden speaking from the Roosevelt Room of the White House. Associated Press writing that the European Union this week will commit to phasing out its reliance on Russia for energy needs as soon as possible, but filling the void without crippling EU economies will likely take some time. The United Kingdom, which is no longer part of the EU, announced Tuesday that oil and oil products from Russia will be phased out by the end of the year. AP article goes on, unlike the U.S., which is a major oil and gas producer, Europe relies on imports for 90% of its gas and 97% of its oil products. Russia supplies 40% of Europe's gas and a quarter of its oil. The U.S. does not import Russian natural gas. Just as President Biden was announcing the ban on Russian energy imports, the House Intelligence Committee hearing testimony from leaders of the U.S. intelligence agencies, and Congressman Raja Krishna asking the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, about the possible effects.
The president appears to be considering banning the import of oil from Russia. What impact do we assess that would have on the Russian economy, Director Haines?
I'm trying to think. So it's roughly 8%, I believe, of our crude oil imports overall. And for them, I believe it's a relatively small amount on theirs, but I think it will have some impact on them. And certainly symbolically, it's an important move if that's something that's done. I'll leave it at that. I'll give you a more detailed answer if we can on the impact on the economy.
Okay, thank you.
For the committee's benefit, since we've been in the hearing for some time, the president announced a ban on Russian oil while we were in the hearing.
I knew it. I knew it.
He was listening to Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Raja Krishnamurthy, Democrat from Illinois, part of today's House Intelligence Committee hearing, the DNI, Avril Haines, testifying, and you heard at the end from the chair of the committee, Congressman Adam Schiff, Democrat from California. With more on President Biden's announcement on banning Russian energy from the U.S., we're joined by Kristine Berzina, Senior Fellow and Head of Geopolitics at the German Marshall Fund's Alliance for Securing Democracy. Thanks for being with us. From your perspective, what effect will the U.S. action have?
The most important thing to understand about this announcement is that now U.S. dollars will no longer go to funding Russia's war effort. The money that Americans pay for their gas, the gasoline they put in their cars or natural gas across the U.S., those dollars will no longer pay for Russia's bullets for the bombs that fall on Ukraine. It is ridiculous to put in sanctions against Russia and not also look at the energy sector. When the energy, oil and gas revenues make up last year 36% of the Russian budget. This is the budget that is what the military draws from, what their information operations take from. It doesn't make sense for Europe, for the United States, to keep putting money into that budget that is now going to fund this war when we are also sanctioning banks and industries in order to stop this war. So I think it's important for the American people to understand, and as all of us have been watching the news, watching the suffering in Ukraine, and so many have contributed to try to help in some way. Well, by filling up your gas tank, you're no longer possibly going to be sending your dollars to pay for that destruction. That is incredibly important. It also has the demonstrative effect to other economies around the world that it is possible and necessary right now to stop buying Russian oil and gas, because the first rounds of sanctions, while important, have longer-term effects, but they have not had an effect of President Putin immediately backing down and saying, maybe let's reconsider this war effort. Maybe let's come to the table and put real constructive ideas to discuss with Ukraine. That has not happened. And so given that this war is continuing, given that suffering is continuing, there is this very big tool that the U.S. had, which is to not let these American dollars be used for evil in Ukraine. And that is what this does.
How long before it will affect Russia's ability to conduct a war? Will it go that far?
Right now, the Russian economy is in free fall. The value of the ruble is collapsing, and yet we have provided opportunities for hundreds of millions in oil and gas revenue to still make it into Russia. Right now, Russia needs to be producing those bullets. It needs to be improving its logistics in order to get their war machine to function well and not shut down in Ukraine. It needs that money right now when other sources of revenue are not available. To take this off in addition means that the other measures can stick. Because the opposite of having this ban is to continue to give them money, which they desperately need right now. That is just, I think, a very important to understand that direct link between each dollar and each dollar going into the Russian military. There is there's a dynamic, though, where Russia will continue to sell oil and gas on global markets, even if the U.S. doesn't buy them. Because the U.S. won't buy them, there's a sense of dearth of resource, there not being enough gas. And the global price of oil would go up. The global price of gas would go up in each market, partially because of the psychological effect of, is there not going to be enough? Will there be a shortage? Anticipating this, and partially to say, we were anticipating this oil to be here or the gas to be here in the next weeks, months, and that we haven't yet figured out a workaround. So I think especially in the short term, there would be an increase in the price of these resources, which means that even if Russia sells less, it gains more money from each unit of oil or gas that it does sell if their prices are higher. And so it's not as though it's not a perfect solution, because if what you're selling is more expensive because of a sense of a deprivation of that resource everywhere, then you get more money from it in the short term. But it would have a lasting effect on the Russian economy to lose these markets globally, to lose these markets in Europe, especially given the absence of turnaround in their policies.
Every day we're hearing of additional sanctions, and this was one that the White House and President Biden were initially reluctant to impose and now has. Are there any other harsher sanctions that are still pending that could make a difference that you know of?
The oil and gas is a very big deal, especially if it goes forward in Europe. The U.S. and Europe are playing a game of who goes first, who's most aggressive, who's most ambitious in setting the sanctions. There's a lot of coordination, but it has a snowballing effect. The fact that the U.S. went bigger than Europe did today, Europe signaled that it would try to reduce its demand for Russian gas by 2/3 this year. That's significant given the very large dependence that Europe has on Russian natural gas. But the U.S. is going further in a way it is pushing Europe to go even beyond where it is today. I mean, we see these policies being brought back to the drawing board. They're announced, and then they're made even more significant and almost on a week-by-week basis on both sides of the Atlantic. So I think that where we are now looking at the oil and gas field, we're in a very we're hitting them where it hurts. And if you go beyond that, I mean, there are possibilities to add more banks to the sanctions list. There are a couple big banks that are not there yet. One of them is Gazprom Bank. The other one is Sberbank. You can expand these lists. You can go even further. But the economic toll is incredibly significant in Russia.
Kristine Berzina is a senior fellow and head of geopolitics at the German Marshall Fund's Alliance for Securing Democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
From CNN Business, U.S. drivers have never paid this much for gasoline. The price of a gallon of regular gas now stands at $4.17, according to AAA. That breaks the previous record of $4.11 a gallon that has stood since July 2008. The article goes on, as Russia continues its military offensive in Ukraine, gas prices are rising faster than they have since Hurricane Katrina slammed into oil platforms and refineries along the U.S. Gulf Coast in 2005. The U.S. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy saying today that even as he welcomes the sanctions on Russia involving banning energy imports. He still blames President Biden for the gas cost increases, for not allowing domestic production to keep up with demand. He spoke on the House floor.
What would you do with $1,300? Would you go on vacation, save for your kids' college, or maybe buy some needed appliances? Well, under Democrats' New America Last energy policy, most Americans have little choice but to spend $1,300 extra on gas to fill up their cars over the course of the next year. Today, the price of gas hit an all-time high. Democrats want to blame surging prices on Russia, but the truth is their out-of-touch policies are why we are here in the first place. Remember what happened on day one with one-party rule. The president canceled the Keystone Pipeline, and then he stopped new oil and gas leases on federal lands and waters. Then he gave the green light to Putin's pipeline. These knee-jerk decisions have damaging effects up and down the supply chain. Now Democrats are creating a fake choice between sanctioning Russia and lowering gas prices. In their twisted thinking, Americans must feel the pain at the pump in order to punish Putin. It doesn't have to be this way. When Democrats' one-party rule started last year, they inherited an energy-independent America. Average prices at the pump were $2.53 a gallon. Oh, do we wish we had those days again? It's still possible to get back to that, though, which is why Republicans offered a bill last week that would approve the Keystone Pipeline, fast-track oil and gas production on federal lands and waters, and remove all hurdles to exporting American natural gas. American people wonder what happened when we offered that. 220 Democrats voted against that. Then we offered targeted solutions to the immediate crisis, like approving the 6 natural gas export permits that are being held up by the Department of Energy. Just approving those 6 permits could increase U.S. natural gas exports by 25%. But Democrats refuse to listen. They think our nation's future is better with leaving our resources in the ground, even if that requires us to buy oil from Iran or Venezuela and batteries from China. It's obvious which party is championing clean, affordable American energy and which party has given up on it.
The House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, on the House floor today. Back to President Biden's announcement at the White House banning Russian energy imports. He pushed back at critics like Congressman McCarthy, who say that price increases at the gas pump are in large part due to his limiting energy production.
It's simply not true that my administration or policies are holding back domestic energy production. That's simply not true. Even amid the pandemic, companies in the United States pumped more oil during my first year in office than they did during my predecessor's first year. We're approaching a record levels of oil and gas production in the United States, and we're on track to set a record of oil production next year. In the United States, 90% of onshore oil production takes place on land that isn't owned by the federal government. And of the remaining 10% that occurs on federal land, the oil and gas industry has millions of acres leased. They have 9,000 permits to drill now. They could be drilling right now, yesterday, last week, last year. They have 9,000 to drill onshore that are already approved. So let me be clear. They are not using them for production now. That's their decision. These are the facts. We should be honest about the facts. Second, this crisis is a stark reminder to protect our economy over the long term, we need to become energy independent. I've had numerous conversations over the last 3 months with our European friends of how they have to wean themselves off of Russian oil. It's just not tenable. It should motivate us to accelerate the transition to clean energy. This is a perspective that our European allies share, and the future where together we can achieve greater independence. Loosening environmental regulations or pulling back clean energy investment won't, let me expand, will not lower energy prices for families. But transforming our economy to run on electric vehicles powered by clean energy with tax credits to help American families winterize their homes and use less energy, that will help. And if we do what we can, it will mean that no one has to worry about the price of the gas pump in the future. That'll mean tyrants like Putin won't be able to use fossil fuels as weapons against other nations. And it will make America a world leader, manufacturing and exporting clean energy technologies of the future to countries all around the world. This is the goal we should be racing toward.
President Biden at the White House. Wall Street today, the Dow down 184, NASDAQ down 35, S&P down 30. The Hill reports that U.S. House lawmakers will be voting Tuesday on a package of sanctions targeting Russia, including a ban on fuel and a new review of Russia's status as part of the World Trade Organization. Legislation will also expand on existing human rights law, the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, which empowers presidents to apply sanctions to those regimes that commit human rights violations, a charge facing Russian President Vladimir Putin for allegedly targeting civilians in Ukraine. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announcing the package in a letter to Democrats today. That from The Hill. United Nations says the number of refugees who have now fled Ukraine, 2 million. Half of them are children. And that 2 million equals, in less than 2 weeks, the flow of Syrian refugees into Europe in all of 2015 and 2016. Back to the U.S. House Intelligence Committee hearing today on worldwide threats and leaders of the U.S. intelligence agencies testifying. The CIA Director William Burns saying that what he and his agency sees as Russian President Vladimir Putin's thinking, motivation, and next moves is pretty dire.
I think Putin is determined to dominate and control Ukraine, to shape its orientation. This is a matter of deep personal conviction for him. He's been stewing in a combustible combination of grievance and ambition for many years. That personal conviction matters more than ever in the Russian system. He's created a system in which his own circle of advisors is narrower and narrower. COVID has made that even narrower. And it's a system in which it's not proven career enhancing for people to question or challenge his judgment. So he's gone to war, I think, on the basis, Mr. Chairman, of a number of assumptions which led him to believe that Russia faced a favorable landscape for the use of force against Ukraine this winter. First, that Ukraine, in his view, was weak and easily intimidated. Second, that the Europeans, especially the French and Germans, were distracted by elections in France and a leadership succession in Germany and risk averse. Third, he believed he had sanctions-proofed his economy in the sense of creating a large war chest of foreign currency reserves. And fourth, he was confident that he had modernized his military and they were capable of a quick, decisive victory at minimal cost. He's been proven wrong on every count. Those assumptions have proven to be profoundly flawed over the last 12 days of conflict. President Zelensky, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, as the ranking member mentioned, has risen to the moment and demonstrated courageous and remarkable leadership, and Ukrainians have resisted fiercely. Second, the Europeans have demonstrated remarkable resolve, especially the Germans. Third, the economic consequences of the sanctions which have been enacted so far are proven to be devastating for Russia, especially against the Russian central bank, depriving Putin of the ability that he assumed he'd have to defend the ruble. And fourth, his own military's performance has been largely ineffective. Instead of seizing Kiev within the first 2 days of the campaign, which was what his plan was premised upon, after nearly 2 weeks, they still have not been able to fully encircle the city. And so, Putin has commented privately and publicly over the years that he doesn't believe Ukraine's a real country. He's dead wrong about that. Real countries fight back. And that's what the Ukrainians have done quite heroically over the last 12 days. As you said, Mr. Chairman, I think Putin is angry and frustrated right now. He's likely to double down and try to grind down the Ukrainian military with no regard for civilian casualties. But the challenge that he faces, and this is the biggest question that's hung over our analysis of his planning for months now, as Director Haynes said, is he has no sustainable political endgame in the face of what is going to continue to be fierce resistance from Ukrainians.
CIA Director William Burns before the House Intelligence Committee, referring to DNI, Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines, also testifying. Also there, the FBI Director Christopher Wray. You can find the full hearing archived at our website, cspan.org. Daily Mail in Great Britain reporting that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today channeled Winston Churchill's wartime defiance as he delivered a historic address to the House of Commons. Mr. Zelensky was given a standing ovation by MPs both before and after his speech, in which he compared Ukraine's fight against Russia to Britain's Second World War struggle against Nazi Germany, drawing on Churchill's iconic "We shall fight them on the beaches" wartime address in June 1940. He said Ukrainians will fight against Moscow's forces on land, sea, and in the air.
We will not give up and we will not lose. We will fight till the end at sea, in the air. We will continue fighting for our land, whatever the cost. We will fight in the forests, in the fields, on the shores, in the streets. I would like to add that we will fight on the banks of different rivers like Dnieper, and we are looking for your help, for the help of the civilized countries. We are thankful for this help, and I'm very grateful to you, Boris. Please increase the pressure of sanctions against this country, and please recognize this country as a terrorist state. And please make sure that our Ukrainian skies are safe. Please make sure that you do what needs to be done and what is stipulated by the greatness of your country. Best of all to Ukraine and to the United Kingdom.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky becoming the first foreign leader today to address the British Parliament. He did so virtually as he remains in Ukraine's capital city, Kyiv, during the war, now in day 14. Referring to Boris, that's Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister. New York Times announcing today that it is pulling all of its correspondents out of Moscow because of the recently passed Russian law that, according to the Times, could make it a crime to accurately report the news about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, including by calling the war a war. Neil MacFarquhar, New York Times national correspondent and former Moscow bureau chief, tweeting, "Very sad day for the history of the New York Times in Moscow. We've had reporters there continuously since 1921, with one or two short interruptions due to visa hiccups. Not Stalin, not the Cold War. Nothing drove us out." Washington Today continues in a minute.
C-SPAN's new American President's website is your one-stop guide to our nation's commanders-in-chief, from George Washington to Joe Biden. Find short biographies, video resources, life facts, and rich images that tell the story of their lives and presidencies, all in one easy-to-browse C-SPAN website. Visit cspan.org/presidents to begin exploring this rich catalog of C-SPAN resources today.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile video app and wherever you get your podcasts. Politico.com has this. Congressional negotiators are inching towards a deal on a massive spending bill after staff worked through the night to prepare text. Top Democrats telling their members on Monday night they plan to release a text of that sweeping funding deal today, Tuesday, with a vote in the House on Wednesday, as long as it all goes according to plan. Early Tuesday morning, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Democrat from Connecticut, chaired the Appropriations Committee with this update.
Good morning. How are you? We're almost there, and we're going to vote tomorrow.
Excuse me. Congressman, do you mind stopping at the poll camera for a second?
Sure, go ahead.
We're still going to vote tomorrow,
We're going to vote tomorrow. We're going to vote tomorrow in the House, yeah.
So there's no holdup on this? It's all...
I said we're about, we're almost done. There's no point in my repeating it 12 times. We're almost done. We're going to vote tomorrow.
Is COVID still an outstanding issue?
That's the House Appropriations Committee Chair, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, with reporters early morning after a House Democratic Caucus meeting. The bill being worked on, about $1.5 trillion for both defense and non-defense spending through the rest of the fiscal year, and that's through the end of September. There's also going to be another $30 billion or so in emergency funding for both Ukraine, military aid and humanitarian relief, and for COVID-19 related programs. The deadline to get it all done, passed by the House, passed by the Senate, signed into law by President Biden, is Friday midnight. That's when the latest temporary spending bill, known as a CR or continuing resolution, expires. The House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, Republican from Louisiana, asked today by reporters about the level of expected Republican support for this omnibus package.
On the omnibus, do you anticipate there will be a lot of Republican support, especially because it includes the Ukraine aid package? And is that something you think leadership is going to be encouraging?
We haven't seen a final package yet. I know there's talk that it may get filed this evening. We would like to see it, the final text. I'm very proud of the work that Kay Granger and her staff have done to make sure that our nation's defense is properly funded, because that was up in the air, and they've resolved that. They've got an agreement to properly fund defense and to keep important riders like the Hyde protections on life. Those are all protected as well. We still need to see if it's going to be multiple packages to vote on. That decision hasn't been made by the Speaker, but we're obviously very supportive of the defense side of this, and we would like to get that done quickly. Thank you all.
Do you want to see the question divided? Is that the third strategy?
We'd like to see a defense package.
That's the House Republican whip Steve Scalise at a news conference with other House Republicans Tuesday morning. That issue of dividing the question, that would be separate votes on the defense and non-defense portions of the omnibus spending bill, but if the whole bill then passes, it would get put back together. By mid-afternoon today, the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, outlining for reporters what is in the omnibus bill for sure and what he'd like to see in there.
Before the end of the week, we are aiming to pass a government funding omnibus bill. Republicans and Democrats are very, very close to finalizing the agreement. I expect there will be text released in a few hours, and we're working very hard on a few last-minute issues, cyber and VAWA. On VAWA, I am pushing very hard to get it in. I'm hopeful that it will, and I think there's a real good chance that VAWA will end up in the bill, which will be another significant legislative accomplishment of this Senate in a bipartisan way, and Joni Ernst has been very, very helpful on that issue. The omnibus has three major parts. One, more than $12 billion in assistance for Ukraine, as Ukrainians fight bravely off Putin's illegal invasion, more than $15 billion for COVID preparedness funding, and many policy changes that are included in the omnibus, including the President's moonshot for cancer research and an increase in Pell Grants. The omnibus comes at a crucial moment. With the war in Europe and the return to normal after the pandemic, we have to confront challenges that we haven't seen in a very long time. The events in Ukraine have necessitated action, and we need to get this done and get it done very fast. The proposal that we've made on Ukraine is strong. We also have $15 billion in COVID preparedness funding. That is a really smart investment. That is just as important as any part of this bill, even though it doesn't get the attention. The odds are that we cannot discount the fact that a new variant can come. And if we have learned a lot from the three variants, but we've also learned if we're not prepared, it can return to the days of lockdowns and closed schools and life not being normal. So there's a real obligation of the Congress to make sure we're prepared, which means immediately having an adequate supply of vaccines, of therapeutics, of testing, so that if, God forbid, the new variant comes, we can go at it right away, go after it right away. Woe be us if we haven't learned the lessons of the previous three. As you know, many of us felt the Trump administration was totally ill-prepared, He was saying, it's not real, it'll go away, and look what happened. We should not repeat that mistake, and I'm very glad on a bipartisan basis we're going to see $15 billion in COVID-prepared funding. It's a really smart investment. We cannot be unprepared if or when the next variant hits. Okay? Across the country, life is returning to normal, thankfully. We want to keep it that way. We want to keep it that way. And only with preparedness can you make sure that happens. We're also addressing another threat, of course, to our way of life. I'm really pleased we're including a robust aid package that will help the people of Ukraine. There is a large chunk of it is humanitarian relief. They lack food, they lack clothing. The Ukrainians lack food, they lack clothing. They lack shelter, electricity, medicines. We must get them these things. There's a Holocaust going on. When you see that people are lined up on buses to just leave a conflict zone and Putin's artillery shells those buses, that is just below humanity, below dignity. We also need to give the brave Ukrainian fighting forces, who are doing much better than anyone ever imagined, the arms they need, whether it be javelins or stingers or anything else. They need these arms simply to defend themselves against brutal Russian aggression. So between the omnibus itself, a whole lot better than a CR, COVID relief, and aid for Ukraine, this omnibus in many ways meets the great challenges that we live in and must confront right now.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer with reporters outlining the omnibus spending bill to fund the federal government, avert a government shutdown when the temporary funding runs out at the end of the week. He also referred to two other bills that he would like to see included, a cybersecurity bill and one that he called VAWA, that's the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization. Senate Republican leaders held a separate news conference today, and the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell expressing support for the emergency aid for Ukraine, announcing it's now up from $12 billion to $14 billion. He also said he would rather see the emergency package as a separate vote.
Let me start by saying if I were the Majority Leader, we'd be on the Ukraine supplemental right now. It's been challenging to get our Democratic colleagues to do what I believe the Ukrainians need at this particular point. But where we've ended up is at $14 billion. In order to get to $14 billion, we actually had to prevent House Democrats from blocking loan guarantees to help Eastern NATO allies buy American aircraft with their own money, which shouldn't have been a problem. The House Democrats tried to cut the administration's request for security assistance by $300 million. In other words, it's been like pulling teeth to get out of House Democrats what the Ukrainians obviously need at this particular time. And we've been slow, much too slow. But the package, I gather, will be coming over from the House attached to the Omni. I think it's an important step. It needs to be passed, and it needs to be passed quickly.
Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, the minority leader at a news conference today with other Senate Republican leaders. Breitbart.com has a story that begins the House Freedom Caucus and Senate conservatives have demanded that the $1.5 trillion omnibus spending bill defund President Joe Biden's remaining vaccine mandates and enact measures to lower energy prices. Board members of the House Freedom Caucus wrote a letter to House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy requesting that he fight to ensure that Congress has a robust debate on aid to Ukraine, unleash policies to reduce energy costs, end the remaining COVID vaccine mandates, and secure the southern border. Well, opposing COVID-19 vaccine mandates has been a focus point of those truck convoys that have been making their way across the country to Washington, D.C. the past week or so. many arriving in the D.C. area recently and have been protesting by going around the Beltway, not actually into Washington, but spending loops around the roads that circle Washington. Today, some of the leaders came into Washington and met with two Republican senators, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin and Ted Cruz of Texas. They were with the group called the People's Convoy. Here are the two senators.
I'm here to listen. Want to hear exactly, what I've read your internet page, that type of thing, so I understand, the basic cause you're fighting for here, and it's freedom. I really appreciate that, but I'm here to listen. Ted, you?
Yeah, look, I want to echo that I appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you guys and hear what you have to say. I think what you're doing is important. You are standing up and speaking out, not just for truckers across the country, but for Americans of all stripes, of all professions and livelihoods. The idea that the government would try to dictate the health care decisions you make in your life and your family, it's fundamentally wrong. And, I think what started in Canada with Canadian truckers was powerful, it was inspirational, and it actually spoke volumes when government leaders tried to stomp it down. They were so scared of ordinary citizens standing up and speaking out. And what y'all are doing is very much the same. It is important. Ron and I in the Senate have been leading the fight against these mandates. These mandates are wrong. It ought to be your decision whether or not you get vaccinated. If you decide to get vaccinated, great, that's your choice. If you decide not to, great, that's your choice. But it's not the job of some petty government tyrant to force that decision on you and to say you're going to lose your livelihood if you don't comply. And so I'll just echo what Ron said, which is I want to hear from you guys in terms of how it's impacting you and what led you all to be part of this convoy and where you hope we go from here.
Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, along with Senator Ron Johnson, Republican from Wisconsin, meeting today in Washington with leaders of that People's Convoy protest. Washington Post writing that as the meeting was taking place, a convoy of trucks, SUVs, and cars was making another loop around the nation's capital. Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson continuing her one-on-one meetings with senators ahead of the Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation hearing, and that's going to begin on March 21st, scheduled to run 4 days. One of the meetings today was with Senator Cory Booker, a Democrat from New Jersey, a member of that committee. They were joined by former Senator Doug Jones, Democrat from Alabama, who is the White House's designated assistant for the nominee, a position known as the Sherpa.
Welcome to my office.
How are you? Thank you.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I love having the bookshelves of my dreams. Doug, when these folks are finished, we'll pull your chair around.
Okay. That's okay.
But why don't we sit down?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you kidding me? So hello, everybody. They're quiet. Usually I get.
Hello, Senator.
Yes, it's going well. Thank you very much for
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday to you.
What do you think of the historic nomination?
This is pretty powerful for me. I told my mom I might have an ugly cry when we sat down, but so far I'm holding it together. Okay, good. My staff only allows me one ugly cry a year, so I try to save it up to make sure. Yes.
Occasions.
Yes. No, it's really tremendous, and so I saw you going to one other meeting earlier today.
Yes.
On the same floor, I think.
I don't know
You
where
don't know,
I
yeah,
am,
yes,
but
in the heart
I
building.
have seen
Yes.
3 senators this morning.
Yes, and you will obviously see a lot more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've got the best Sherpa
I do.
ever imaginable.
Fantastic.
Yes, to guide you on this journey. He is. I miss him terribly, but he's really one of the best gifts to this place when he was here.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, a tremendous person. And did you have any say in that, or was it the White House that was sort of?
The White House was very prescient.
Yes.
They knew we needed the best.
Yeah.
All right, thank you guys.
That's wonderful.
Thank you, Press.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. And Doug, how's it feel to be back up here?
It feels good.
Good.
It's great to see you. But I went out on the floor the other day. And a bunch of people there, and they were all.
All right, guys, we gotta go.
It's really.
In the Capitol Hill office of Senator Cory Booker, Democrat from New Jersey, meeting with Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson and the Sherpa, the assistant designated by the White House, former U.S. Senator Doug Jones. Another meeting today for the nominee was with Senator Susan Collins, Republican from Maine. Collins was one of 3 Republican senators who voted to confirm Judge Jackson a year ago to her current position on the federal appeals court.
I live in Bangor, but I'm from northern Maine, way in the northern part. And I understand you were born here in D.C., but then moved to Florida.
To Florida, so I grew up in Miami, which was nice.
Yeah.
It's warm.
Yes.
They're very different from Maine.
True. And I love the story of your father going to law school when you were in pre-kindergarten.
That is exactly what happened.
That's something they must be very proud.
So proud. Excited.
Great. Really,
Senator Collins, is 24 days enough time from nomination to hearing start enough for you?
You know, I'm not going to talk about substance right now while you're all here, but I have a nice notebook of the issues that I'm going to raise, and I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down with the judge and talk to her about issues and get to know her better. This is the first time that I've had the opportunity of meeting her. So we'll see how things go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
She passed that test. She got engaged in Maine.
I did
so,
indeed.
You know,
engaged in Maine. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Senator Susan Collins, Republican from Maine, with Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Again, the Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court nominee begin March 21st. Going to run expected 4 days. First day is opening statements. Day 2 and 3, questioning by the senators to the nominee. And then on day 4, there'll be outside witnesses from the American Bar Association and other invited interest groups. You can follow it all live on the C-SPAN network, C-SPAN television, C-SPAN radio, and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile video app. A tense exchange today during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. The topic was hate crimes. As Bloomberg Law explained in an article in February, here's the issue. Senator Tom Cotton, Republican from Arkansas, is blocking the traditionally rapid floor consideration of 6 U.S. attorneys and 2 U.S. marshals. He's insisting the Justice Department provide legal representation to 4 deputy marshals who've been sued for their role in the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests in Portland, Oregon, or give a more fulsome explanation. That was from Bloomberg Law. Here's what happened in the committee. You're going to hear from Senator Cotton, also Senator Dick Durbin, the committee chair, Democrat from Illinois, Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, ranking member, and one of the witnesses, Kristine Clark, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Starts with Senator Durbin.
The senator from Arkansas is raising an issue which we've raised on the floor several times. He's put a hold on 6 U.S. attorneys and 2 U.S. marshals, and as a consequence, their posts to remain vacant during this period of time. He is actually in the process of defunding law enforcement at the federal level. And it isn't because of anything that these individuals have done wrong or anything in their background that suggests they're not qualified. He is concerned about a case in Oregon and believes all U.S. attorneys should be held from performing their duties as a result of it. I disagree.
Could I say something?
Of course.
I haven't had a conversation with Senator Cotton on this, but if his request of you is this simple, all you got to say is why these people are being defended or not being defended to release these holes he has on, and I haven't discussed this with you, but why is it so darn difficult to just get a simple answer to a very simple question of why you aren't doing something?
Yes, Senator, I just want to make sure that you get an accurate answer. So I do want the opportunity to take that question back. I believe this is handled by our civil division. I don't know the answer, Senator, and I want to make sure that this committee has accurate answers and responses when it comes to the department's work. It's not a civil rights division issue.
Senator Grassley, they have been asked to defend 74, I understand, individuals who were working for the federal government in Portland, Oregon. They've agreed to defend 70, turned down 1, 3 are under review. I assume that there are circumstances here that they have not disclosed. They certainly haven't to the senator from Arkansas because he's not brought them up. But it appears to me that we have an attorney-client privilege issue and an issue of confidentiality with these employees. They may not want to go public with this. We don't know. We just know that 6 U.S. attorneys are sitting waiting for an opportunity to serve this country in law enforcement, and they're being held up for no reason related to them personally. It is a grievance which Senator from Arkansas has with the department.
So I'll just say that the fact that 70 have been approved for representation and 4 have not means that someone in the department must have reviewed these cases with particularity, and there's a reason why they're not representing the 4, and they will not give that reason. They will not give it not only to me, they will not give it to those 4 marshals and their lawyers either. And if Merrick Garland and Joe Biden thinks that they're going to get their political nominees in this department fast-tracked through the Senate while they are hanging career law enforcement officers out to dry, they've got another thing coming. And I'll just correct what the chairman said. It's not a handful of U.S. attorneys and U.S. marshals. It's every political nominee in the department, and every political nominee in the department will not get fast-tracked through this committee or the floor until these marshals get represented or until they get an answer.
So the senator from Arkansas is keeping U.S. attorney positions vacant across the United States. These are individuals responsible for prosecuting crimes. He calls them political appointees or whatever he wishes. They're being chosen in the ordinary course of business, just as every one of them was done under the previous president. And we're asking for the same treatment, but he says no. He wants us to somehow waive attorney-client privilege or confidentiality. I can't do that. I don't have the power to do that. I'm sure the attorney who's here, General Clark, doesn't either.
Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, chair of the Judiciary Committee, in exchange with Senator Tom Cotton, Republican from Arkansas, member of the committee. You also heard from Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, committee ranking member, and one of the witnesses, Kristine Clark, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Associated Press reporting a Texas man was convicted on Tuesday of storming the U.S. Capitol with a holstered handgun, a milestone victory for federal prosecutors in the first trial among hundreds of cases arising from last year's riot. Jury also convicted Guy Wesley Reffitt of obstructing Congress's joint session to certify the Electoral College vote on January 6, 2021, of interfering with police officers who were guarding the Capitol, and of threatening his 2 teenage children if they reported him to law enforcement after the attack. Jurors deliberated about 3 hours and convicted him on all counts. AP story concluding the verdict could be a bellwether for many other Capitol riot cases. Former Vice President Mike Pence today, reports Fox Business, did not rule out a run for president in 2024 while speaking during an interview on Mornings with Maria. Maria is the host, Maria Bartiromo.
Mr. Vice President, before you go, a word on 2024. Do you want President Trump to run? Are you looking to get back into leadership?
You know, all of my focus right now is on 2022. I think we have a historic opportunity to reclaim majorities in the House and the Senate to elect great Republican governors around America. And in 2023, I'm confident the Republican Party will nominate a candidate who will be the next president of the United States of America. And at the right time, my family and I will reflect and consider how we might participate in that process. But now more than ever, with war in Europe and with an administration seemingly intent on weakening our country, driving our nation toward a European-style welfare state, we need strong Republican majorities on Capitol Hill and strong Republican governors. And that's what we're going to work to achieve.
Former Vice President Mike Pence, under President Trump, Republican, on Fox Business today, not ruling out totally a run for president in 2024. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. You get more Washington stories sent to you each day by subscribing to C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word. Go to c-span.org/connect to subscribe. Hope you have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day we take your calls live on the air, on the news of the day, and discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Wednesday morning, We discuss the latest on the Russia-Ukraine crisis with Utah Republican Congressman Blake Moore, a member of the Armed Services Committee, and California Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern, Wednesday morning on C-SPAN or C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app. Join the conversation with your phone calls, Facebook comments, text messages, and tweets.